Hey, Marshall here to tell you about an incredibly easy way anyone who loves brewing and drinking beer can save a little bit of money. In addition to supporting everything we do here at Brülosophy, the American Homebrewers Association recently introduced their free Brü Guru mobile app. It offers a searchable database of homebrew recipes, including popular craft beer clones and hundreds of award-winning recipes from the National Homebrew Competition. What's more, Brü Guru has a searchable map of deals at breweries, beer bars, and homebrew shops. Grab the free Brü Guru app for iPhone and Android devices today and follow the path to great beer. You've got questions, and we have got some answers. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and this is the third Brü A episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Contributor Brian Hall is with me. We got a bunch of questions that we're going to be getting to. People who have asked us stuff about the way we brew, our thoughts on certain experiments, all that kind of stuff. Well, our plans are to do a Brü A episode every 10th show or so. We've got something pretty special planned for next week for our 30th episode. So we push this one up. I think it's going to be cool. If we don't get to a question that you asked, can almost guarantee that it is on a list for a future show. I promise that we will get to those, in the future. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. We pretty much add everything anyone asks about to a Brü A show. It's not just about like brewing process or anything like that. You can ask whatever you want to ask us. It's going to be pretty good. Brian, how you doing? I know it's probably pretty cold up there in Anchorage right now.
I'm doing fantastic. We are sitting at a balmy 24 degrees. It's a beautiful morning.
Yeah, we got real cold here in the Central Valley. I was about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where the high I think was in the low 60s, and people bundling. I know, right? Real rough life. People bundling up and wearing scarves in California. It's kind of funny.
How do you maintain mash temperatures at that? I just don't even. I don't even follow how you would do that.
Well, and it's rough because I brew in my garage, which stays, about 10 degrees warmer than it is outside, typically. So I still bear it out in shorts and flip-flops. But
no, things are going great here. I got a mash going right now, actually. So when we're done here, I'm going to go downstairs and take care of that.
Right on. I know you're brewing for NHC, right?
I am brewing for NHC. I got 4 entries going in. I'm super excited for that.
Awesome, man. And we've heard from a bunch of people in the Brew Club who have entered or got some slots approved for the National Homebrew Competition. So it'll be fun to see if those folks end up taking any medals. The Brew Club is a real thing. If you want to learn more about it, you can head over to thebrewclub.com. That's thebruclub.com. They've got a lot of cool stuff going on. In fact, I just sat in on their first kind of monthly meeting, and it was cool. They got to lob questions at me, and we just talked a little bit about Brülosophy and the history of this whole thing and where we're going. Again, that's thebrewclub.com. Something I've been getting asked a lot about is Imperial yeast, which we've been using for a while now. They recently switched to their new pitch-right pouches, which are super cool, really good looking, and arguably easier to use than their cute cans, which are now a thing of the past. Each pack contains 200 billion cells of the purest yeast on the market, assuring rapid starts to fermentation, great attenuation, and quick finishes. It really is awesome stuff. Imperial yeast has various ale and lager strains, as well as some stuff for all the funk milkers out there. Be sure to check it out at imperialyeast.com to see it for yourself. We're going to be partnering with Imperial as well as Yakima Valley Hops and Mecca Great Estate Malt at HomebrewCon for our expo booth. And no, I'm not going to stop talking about it because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to meet a ton of people there. We're going to be recording some live shows. In fact, I just got off a call a few days ago with this crew, and our plans keep getting bigger and more fun. There's not much I can say now because we kind of want it to be a surprise, but I promise it's going to be a blast. Jersey and Tim are going to be there reviewing beers live, which is just going to be silly, I'm sure. You can become a member of the AHA, which you have to be if you want to go to HomebrewCon by going to brülosophy.com/AHA or homebrewersassociation.org. It's worth being a member whether you go to HomebrewCon or not. They offer all kinds of great discounts to homebrewers. You can get the Brü Guru app. They've got all kinds of great stuff. So again, that's HomebrewCon 2018, end of June. It's going to be rad. Don't miss out. We've got some new merch that's going to be coming out soon. Another thing that we're doing with Yakima Valley Hops. We've tapped their design person who is just amazing. Melissa has been helping us come up with some cool new designs. You're going to see some new shirts. I think we've got some plans to release some new hats and then some other fun trinkets as well. It's not out there yet. But we have placed the order for the shirts. So that's starting, and they will be on the Yakima Valley Hops website very soon. We'll be sure to make an announcement. And one way that you can hear about that is by signing up for our new newsletter. It's called The Hop Beat. You can do it from brulosophy.com. There's a little sign up form on the right side of the website. All you do is put your email address in there, and then we email you once a month with everything that we've been doing and some updates and whatnot. Again, that's the Hop Beat. You can go sign up right now. So just a couple days ago, we had our very first live cast Q&A session with Michael Tonsmeyer. Now, the only people who were able to attend this were those who contribute at the $3 level over at Patreon. That money, that $3 a month, not only goes to support the stuff that we're doing so that we can keep bringing you these shows and doing what we do over at brulosophy.com, but you also get rewarded for doing it as well. And the reward at the $3 level is that you get to participate in these really cool Q&A live casts with people that you want to ask questions to. So Michael Tonsmeyer, the mad fermentationist, he is now starting Sapwood Cellars. He was with us just a few days ago. And next month, I'm really excited to announce that John Palmer, the man who taught us all how to brew, he's going to be with us. We've got some other great guests lined up throughout the year. Gordon Strong, Dr. Bamforth, Charlie Bamforth from the brewing department up at UC Davis, a very lauded program up there. He's agreed to come on the show. We've got some very, very well-known professional brewers who are kind of saying that they might be interested. So it's a really cool reward for $3 a month. Goes to help us out. You also get access to never before published recipes, unique discounts at Yakima Valley Hops. We do a monthly video chat with people who contribute at a certain level, all kinds of cool stuff. So again, you can check out what we have to offer over at patreon.com/brulosophy. There's all kinds of cool rewards. Again, that's patreon.com/brulosophy. For other ways you can help us out, you can go to brulosophy.com/support. You're going to find a bunch of links to places to shop online there. Something as simple as bookmarking and using those links has a huge impact on what we are able to do. We want to thank everyone who's remembered to do that so far. Also, thanks to all of the people who have taken the time to subscribe to the podcast as well as leave a rating and a review. We really do appreciate that. If you haven't done it, please go do it soon. All right. So over the last, 2 or 3 years, I noticed this weird trend for brewers to use actual cereal in their beer. I've never done this, but we're talking like boxed cereal that usually really sweet that like a kid might eat. Well, this home brewer, Jeremy Barr, sent me a Doppelbock that he made using 3 boxes of Count Chocula cereal. So, of course, I gave it to my buddies for review.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
It's dark, musty, and danky. It's like a dark castle.
Ooh.
I get so excited when you like them.
It is very good.
What do you mean very good?
It's tasty. It's very tasty.
You know how I know this is a good beer? Because I'm spilling liquids all over my leg. I don't know, Matt. You like it?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you like about it? You don't know. You just randomly like shit.
It just tastes good.
Use your words. It's got like a punch at the end. I think it's
right
high in
at the
content.
end. I think it is a little high. It's kind of like wine at the end.
It's like, dude, I want to be your friend. And you're like, come on in, man. And then it punches you in the face.
But the initial taste is very good.
Ooh, that's strong at the end. Dude, I know what this wants to be. And it's like, then it punches you in the face. You're like, I don't know. I don't remember anything.
I don't remember either.
I blacked out. What happened?
This beer was made with 3 boxes of Count Chocula cereal.
I was literally just about to say this tastes like Count Chocula cereal, dude. Didn't I say? I wrote it down right there. I was just about to say it, and then he had to
couldn't
come
read your
in.
handwriting, but yeah, now that you say
Hang on. Did you eat a lot of Count Chocula cereal?
it doesn't taste like this. I like it. It does have that punch right at the end.
Yeah, it's got a punch at the end. As I drink more of it, the punch lessens. This is a spiced mulled wine that I've been really into lately.
Right at the end, it does. It has some wine flavoring.
It's growing on me. The punch lessens as I drink it more. I don't taste any chocolate, though.
I'm not getting the chocolate either.
Yeah, dude, I'm sorry.
I got to be honest. I sort of agree that the chocolate character in this beer didn't really come through as much as I would have expected, given how much actual Count Chocula was used in the beer. Brian, have you ever had a beer that was made using cereal?
No, I've never actually had Count Chocula, so I don't even know what it tastes like in the first place. But I can imagine a chocolate bock would be quite delicious.
So Count Chocula it's like Lucky Charms, but a chocolate version, right? It's got like those hard marshmallow things in it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and I think it only comes out around Halloween nowadays. But I ate it when I was a kid and never thought it was a bad cereal, but it didn't really come through in this beer. It was a Doppelbock, so the guys were pretty good on noting the alcohol kind of in the finish there. To me, the aroma of this beer was very lager-like, very clean. There wasn't much chocolate, like I said, and there was a little bit of toast kind of in the aroma. The flavor was basically the same, though I got a hint of some dark fruit in the background. And in the flavor, I did get just kind of a whisper of chocolate. No off flavors, really clean fermentation, slightly warming alcohol, but besides that, pretty good beer, actually. We finished the entire bottle that Jeremy sent us. So thanks so much, Jeremy. That was really cool. If you would like to have your beer or your cider or your mead or any other drink that you make featured on the Jersey and Tim beer review, you can email me, marshall@brulosophy.com, and we will get you all set up. I really do appreciate everyone who sent stuff in. I think it takes a lot of bravery to do that, given what you're likely gonna hear from these guys. So, all right, when we come back, we have got a bunch of questions we're gonna be getting to.
Compact and simple to use with a small footprint for brewing indoors, the Grainfather makes it easy for you to brew professional quality beers at home. The Grainfather is an all-in-one brewing system that lets you brew all grain beer in a single compact stainless steel unit. It uses an electric heating element and pump to maintain a constant temperature and to circulate the wort during the mashing and cooling stages. It also comes with a counterflow chiller to reduce chilling times and produce high-quality wort. And now, with the addition of their conical fermenter, the Grainfather takes things one step further by offering homebrewers state-of-the-art temperature-controlled fermentation just like commercial breweries use. And with the Grainfather Recipe Creator and Connect app, you can easily design a recipe, sync your brewing system with your phone, and then just sit back and relax as the app takes over and assures that you maintain your scheduled mash temps and boil schedule. Head to grainfather.com to purchase your all-in-one brewing system today and to sign up for their free recipe creator tool. Once more, head on over to grainfather.com, that's grainfather.com, and get started today.
When dumping wort-soaked grain and leftover low-gravity wort while cleaning up after a brew day, do you ever wonder what your true efficiency would be if that wort made its way to the kettle instead? Using the brew bag, a fabric filter for all mash tuns and brewing methods, allows you to capture every last drop of wort. Not only does this increase kettle efficiency, it lowers your grain bill, which saves you money. Throwing wort in the trash is like dumping a 12-pack down the drain and just doesn't make sense. Use the brew bag and leave no wort behind. I've been using these filters for a long time and recommend them to everyone. I never have to worry about a stuck sparge and cleanup is fast and easy. Go grab yourself a brew bag fabric filter at brewinabag.com and be sure to use code TBP17 at checkout to get a discount on your order. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste time chilling wort, which is why I use cleverly designed immersion chillers from Jaded Brewing. After some bad experiences with counterflow and plate chillers, I began the search for a more efficient chilling solution and discovered Jaded. That was nearly 4 years ago, and to this day, I continue to rely on the King Cobra and the Hydra to chill my wort in record time without the setup or cleaning hassle of other chillers. If you're looking for a way to optimize your brew day, I can't recommend Jaded chillers enough. Go see what they have to offer at jadedbrewing.com and let them know Brulosophy sent you. And we're back. Okay, time to get to the first question. We're going to jump right into this thing. Via email, I got a question from a man named Michael Wolek. He says, in an attempt to get some knowledgeable feedback on my beer, I entered a local contest. Boy, I could just go off on how that feedback, anyways. While I scored okay, he got a 35 out of 50 and made it to the mini best of show round. I'm confused by one of the comments I received. While they generally found the beer pleasant with no faults, they felt it lacked the malt complexity to be memorable. Do you have some suggestions as to how I can add complexity without muddling the flavors? So I think he's asking us what he might be able to do to make his malt complexity more memorable. Here's a rundown of the malts that he used in this pale ale. He used 68% pale ale malt, 14% flaked oats, pretty common these days, I think, for these hazy hoppy beers. He used 9% light Munich, so that's like a 7 Love, 10 Love Munich, 5% Carapils, and 5% Crystal 20. Man, Brian, what do you think? That seems like a very memorable malt bill to me.
It looks good to me. and the thing that I go back to on this is like taste is subjective. So it really comes down to what those particular judges thought at that particular moment. I always take competition feedback with a truckload of salt, and that, it's one person's opinion or maybe two or three people's opinion, and not necessarily that of multiple people.
Right. Yeah. Looking at this, that is probably, if I were to make that beer, it would be the most complex malt bill that I've used probably in the last 3 years for a pale ale. So
yeah, it looks solid. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And
No.
in a pale ale, the malt bill is supporting. It's not supposed to showcase the beer. I mean, the idea that the beer was docked because the malt complexity wasn't memorable, I don't know. It just seems odd to me.
Yeah. Well, and you look at classic American pale ale. Let's just take something like Sierra Nevada's Green Label, their Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Right.
That I get it. That has some C60 in it. You're going to get a little bit more of that caramel flavor. It's got a not balanced, but more malt complexity than I think a lot of modern day pale ales, which are basically just pale malt and hops, So to me, this seems solid. One of my issues with and I'll point the finger at myself when I'm judging is that if I'm judging a flight of pale ales, palate fatigue. When you're judging beers, you are sitting there and you are evaluating 5 to 8 beers on this flight. There's no way that you're not going to be influenced when you get to beer number 5 on your flight and you started off with a super hoppy pale ale, that you're in some way not going to be influenced by that. And I could see how that might lead to someone thinking that the malt complexity wasn't really there when perhaps it really was. I'd be curious to know what number in the flight Michael's beer was.
Right. Also just thinking about the judges, I'd be curious to see who judged it. Was it their first time judging? Was it their 10th time judging? I think sometimes that having a little bit of experience in what you're looking for can help out, and sometimes in that process.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So, Michael, hopefully we helped you out with that one. I'm not sure there's anything you can do to get a more complex malt bill or malt character out of that beer. That looks like a really solid malt bill for me. All right, next question.
Yeah, we're going to go on to John. John asked this via Facebook, and he's asking, what is the mechanism via which dextrose dries out a beer? I've seen it recommended to add a small amount at the end of of the boil for big IPAs to help ensure a lower final gravity, but why does this work? Does it work? Why does yeast finish at a lower terminal gravity when simple sugars are in the mix?
This is such a weird question for me because it's something I've thought about too. Like how can you dry out a beer more that's already done fermenting, but you toss in some let's say you're at a 12 or 1015 FG, you toss in some sugar, and next thing you know, it's at 1009 or something like that. I think that's what he's hitting on.
Yeah, I think that's it. And there's people when they brew some of these bigger IPAs, I think the idea is that they're replacing some of the malt with some dextrose. I don't think it should be thought of as so much that you're adding dextrose onto the malt bill. Although if you did add enough dextrose, and you get more alcohol production, you could actually lower your specific gravity, since alcohol has such a low specific gravity. So I think the idea what he might be getting at is that if you are replacing some of that malt bill with some dextrose, it's going to ferment out up to 100%. And not only that, you'll get you'll have a lack of residual body from that, but you're also adding just more straight alcohol to it. And since alcohol has such a low specific gravity, you're going to bring down that final gravity, giving you less apparent body as well.
Exactly. I mean, that's you said it all there. Basically, when he asked why does yeast finish at a lower terminal gravity when simple sugars are in the mix, it's because simple sugars are simple. The sugars that we are extracting when we perform a mash, there's a lot of long chain stuff in there that the type of yeast that we're using typically, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, doesn't metabolize, and that's a good thing on many levels. We want to keep that stuff around. It gives us body. It gives us foam formation, stuff like that. But simple sugar is almost 100%, or maybe is 100% fermentable by these yeasts that we use. So by replacing some of that grain bill, you are basically doing it with the intention of driving that dryness.
Yeah, I mean that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah. So hopefully that answered your question, John. Next question comes from Thorvald Anderson. This is also via Facebook. He has a couple of questions. The first one, he says, in regards to vitality starters, is there a reason why one should not aerate the batch after pitching the yeast? It doesn't really make sense to me.
I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't, or I can't think of a reason why aerating the batch would be bad practice. I generally don't tend to aerate my beers after making a vitality starter, or most starters, to be honest. But if you are looking for the ability for yeast to be able to reproduce, they do need oxygen to be able to do that. So I can't think of any harm that would come to you from oxygenating your wort. I could think of reasons why, things that might happen from not oxygenating it, but I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't want to.
Yeah. This is kind of like a double question here. So one of them is there a reason, it doesn't really make sense, he says, but is there a reason why one shouldn't aerate? Not really. I mean, it's easy enough to splash your wort around and all that. Now, by making a vitality starter, there's some contention out there that you don't really need to aerate because of what you're pushing those yeasts through. You're making them more vital. They're, rearing and ready to go. You're getting that oxygen. The oxygen that they need for respiration is already there. And that's the argument, right? But you're not going to harm anything by aerating, your wort prior to pitching, even a vitality starter. So I'm not going to recommend don't aerate it, but if you don't, I think you're still going to have positive results. At least that's been my experience. I don't do anything extra special to aerate, but I do vigorous transfers from my kettle to my fermenters. And when I pitch vitality starters, I'm usually seeing activity within, 2 to 4 hours. So
yeah, its activity comes pretty quick. And just the motion of getting the carboy into the fermentation chamber, those sorts of things, you're going to shake it up. And in my experience, that's been enough for me.
Yeah. So his next question, he says, I'm getting into water treatment starting from our next batch. I'm sure he's probably already brewed this batch because we got this question a while ago. Do you recommend treating the sparge water as well as the mash water, or is it enough to simply treat the mash water? Ooh, that's a great question. Brian, what do you think?
Well, what I'm doing right now, I treat them both at the same time because I'm no sparging. But when I am using a sparge, I do treat my sparge water just for consistency's sake, to make sure that all my water has the same mineral profile. So there's the questions whether you want to add salts to your sparge water, or do you want to acidify your sparge water, or do you want to do both? I treat all the water the same. I use Brü water, and I go in there and it tells me exactly how to dose it for what I'm looking for. I think the concern is that if you aren't treating your sparge water, you can do what's called over-sparging, where you run so much water through your mash, at some point the pH of the mash becomes too high, and you can supposedly extract tannins, and which can cause astringency.
Yeah,
I've never had that problem. I've never really thought about. I've never really gotten to the point where I've thought that I'm over-sparging. But at this point, I'm doing a no sparge Brü bag.
I do the same thing these days. But back when I was doing batch sparge and I had separate, I would collect my my strike and my sparge water in separate vessels. I think it depends on what your aim is. If your aim is like improvement of mashing, and you're concerned about getting consistent efficiency and whatnot, you really don't need to treat your sparge water. But in my opinion, as long as that sparge water doesn't drop your, the mash pH too low, or too high, like Brian was saying. But the other thing is flavor, and what we're finding is that these flavor ions, particularly sulfate, chloride, all the stuff that we use for brewing, do have an impact regardless of where you add them in the process. So we've got an experiment that we did where I added salts to the keg. These minerals were added to the keg, either chloride or sulfate, and people could tell them apart. So if your aim is flavor, then I absolutely recommend just mineralize everything to the same, and you should be good to go. Like Brian said, I do the same thing. I collect all of my water. I brew no sparge, so it's all getting treated anyways. I just think it's easier that way.
Yeah, definitely easier to do it all at once. So our next question comes from Bruce Greenberg. This is via email. And he says, my brew buddy Mario and I have been debating proper cleaning and sanitizing procedures. They use PBW and Star San. Mario has a Mark II keg and carboy washer, and he's got a homemade version. For the washer, we mix up a gallon of hot water and PBW. And what they're wondering is, how long do they need to run the washer for a corning keg to be clean? Should it be 2 minutes, 20 minutes? Should you just run it until you can't see any more particulate? Yeah. What do you think, Marshall?
Well, I don't use one of those, and I know, we've written about Ray's Brew Blaster, if you will.
I actually
and
just built one of those the other day, a couple weeks ago, and I was just running it last night, and I found that about 30 minutes seemed to get all the gunk off that I couldn't even get off with scrubbing.
Huh. So I've never used one of these, and but just kind of the practical perspective that I've got is you clean it till it's clean, and I wouldn't know how long to run it. So, Bruce, I would recommend you and Mario run those things until you're not seeing any more particulate. That seems about right to me. He then asks, is PBW environmentally safe? Is it okay to dump in the garden?
I actually looked this one up just to make sure that what I was saying was correct, and it is listed as environmentally safe. I think on their sheet it says it's okay to dump into your septic system. It doesn't say anything about gardens. I can't think of anything I'd really want to dump in my garden other than water. But so my answer would be like, personally, I put it in my septic system, but I wouldn't go out and just throw it right in my garden. I've dumped it in a yard before and never seen anything that's stopped living suddenly, but yeah.
I have no clue, honestly. I did the same thing. We looked into this, and it says that it's safe. I don't garden, so I don't know if it would do anything to your veggies and your fruits, but maybe test it out. I don't know. He also asks if it's okay to soak his tubing, bungs, and other soft items in PBW or Star Sand. Well, of course it is. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I use the Kraftmeister's alkaline brewery wash, which is really similar to BBW, and it is a nice soak in that stuff for 20 minutes. Cleans pretty much anything, and I love it. Definitely works well. Soaking stuff in Star Sand is a little bit different, especially soft tubing like vinyl tubing. You'll notice you start to get a film that develops, and it's almost kind of sticky.
It's like a soapy buildup is how I've heard it described before, and I've heard it's harmless, right. But I give it about a minute, and that's all it needs.
Yeah, for Star Sand, I do the same thing. Or if I'm brewing, I'll leave it in there for the couple 2 or 3 hours. But I'm not gonna, I don't just soak stuff or leave stuff in the Star Sand these days. But if you do get that kind of gunky buildup, a nice little PBW soak will clean it right up. So. He asks, finally, what are considered to be best practices in cleaning? It might be interesting to have an expert from 5 Star as a guest on the show. That would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think the term best practices, I think that comes down to what works for you. My best practice used to be at least a soaking PBW, a rinse, and then a dunk in Star Sand for a minute. Now I use, just to reduce my water usage, I use the CIP cleaner that Ray recommended. But yeah, I think it comes down to whatever works for you to where you're not getting contamination in your brewery.
For sure. All right. This next question comes from somebody that I am very excited about. If anybody's been paying attention to the Olympics, you probably know that the American Shaun White took gold in the halfpipe, and it was amazing, and he did an incredible job. Well, he sent in a question via email from Canada. Go ahead, Brian.
He says, I listened to the episode on mash pH, and you only noted a couple ways of acidifying the mash. Up where I'm in Canada, it is extremely easy to get citric acid, which is what I use. Is there any difference between using citric acid as far as a flavor contribution than using any of the other methods that you mentioned in the show?
So obviously I'm realizing this guy's from Canada, so it's not the Shaun White from the Olympics, but we do, that would be cool. Shaun White, if you ever want to get on the show, let me know. There are, Brian, you might have a better response, but I'm going to go super practical here. If you've ever tasted different beers dosed with different forms of acids, I've used phosphoric, citric. I use lactic nowadays. They do impart a different flavor, in my experience. You want to be careful of that. Because if you're going to be using a bunch of acid to adjust your water, that may very well have an impact on the ultimate flavor of your beer or whatever it is. You're adding that acid to. Lately, I've been adding, up to 20 milliliters of lactic acid to my ciders, for example, to give it kind of a sharpness. And so you just want to pay mind to the fact that it could, impact the flavor of your drink.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you're looking at flavor contributions, you just have to sit down. If I was going to do it, I would sit down, dose a couple beers with a couple different acids and see which one I like the best. I've heard of people using citric acid in their IPAs because they like that flavor. They're looking for a little more citrus. So I can't think of any other reason that you wouldn't want to use one above the other unless it's a flavor preference thing.
Yeah, no, totally agree. All right, well, that's our first set of questions. When we come back from this quick break, we are going to be getting to the rest. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Shopping for brewing supplies online can be a real hassle, which is why we recommend Love to Brew. They've got great prices, super fast shipping, and they carry exclusive products like East Coast Yeast, the Brewer's Essentials brand, and their award-winning beer recipe kits. They're also the only place you can pick up your very own Brewlosophy recipe kit. The numbers don't lie. Love to Brew has hundreds of 5-star reviews, and thousands of brewers are choosing them for their supplies and ingredients each year. Experience the difference at lovetobrew.com. That's love, the number 2, brew.com. Founded in 1978 by brewing pioneer Charlie Papazian, the American Homebrewers Association is a division of the Brewers Association focused specifically on protecting and promoting the hobby of homebrewing. In addition to their work lobbying for the rights of homebrewers across the country, they're also the primary sponsor of Brewlosophy.com. By joining the AHA, not only are you supporting their cause, but you get a ton of benefits as well. Discounts at breweries across the U.S., early access to tickets for events like the Great American Beer Festival, and you get to attend HomebrewCon, the world's biggest gathering of homebrewers. Head over to Brewlosophy.com/AHA now to sign up to become a member.
All right, welcome back. We've got another question here from Andrew Harris from Swansea in the UK. He says, I've been brewing for the last years using a brew in a bag setup for about 3 years here. I'm limited for space and don't like spending money if I don't have to. I can relate to that. And he has a question about grain crush methods. So normally he buys his grain pre-crushed from an online homebrew shop, but he wants to have grain on hand so that he can let it sit around and brew when he wants to. So recently he says he crushed/pulverized the grain using his NutriBullet blender, which is the magic bullet in the US. A few pulses and about 2-pound batches seemed to work, and it took him about 5 minutes. He made an American Amber Ale with these grains, and it turned out well and cleared up nicely. And he's asking, from a brewing tradition perspective, are there any reasons this technique poses issues for flavor, clarity, shelf life, etc.?
Well, I think the biggest argument is going to be that when you pulverize your grain, you're also pulverizing that husk, which can increase the risk of tannin extraction. A relatively big concern, I think, among professional and homebrewers alike. And what that ultimately leads to is astringency. So that black tea kind of, I get a puckering feeling in my mouth or kind of a fuzziness on my tongue. Now, I've never pulverized grain and brewed with pulverized grain, so I'm not totally sure how that works or if it would actually happen. If you're pleased with the beer that you're making this way, Andrew, then by all means keep doing it. But I don't know. Is there any other downsides to doing that you can think of, Brian?
Not off the top of my head. I know we've been discussing a little bit between the crew about wort trub coming into the fermenter and the effects that might have. So,
right.
I think it just comes down to, are you enjoying the beer that you're drinking? If it's coming out and it's tasting fine and it seems like it's not changing over time for you and you're happy with the clarity, you're kind of answering your own questions there. As far as tradition goes, I don't know. I've been reading a lot lately. I haven't really found anything that's definitive. In my personal experience, the beers I make using the brew in the bag technique, I set my mill a little finer. I wouldn't say I'm sending it through a NutriBullet, but but my crush comes out a little finer, and my beers come out great. So
I'd imagine, I've seen these magic bullets or NutriBullets in the store. I'd imagine like a 5-gallon batch, it'd probably take, quite a long time to mill, 10, 12 pounds of grain using one of these small things. But, if you're doing like 1-gallon batches, I suppose it might work decently.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes down to just whatever works for you.
Definitely. And, I've been using a 3-roller mill for a little over a year now, almost 2 years, I think. And before that, I was on a 2-roller. And on both, I have my mill gap set really quite close. And I've not noticed any issues with astringency, regardless of how fine I mill. So I do question this idea that pulverizing grain is going to, increase tannin extraction. Something to kind of test out. We've done a couple of experiments on grain crush, and they've been really interesting. So you can check those out at the website. All right. Next question comes from James Castellano via email. He says, he's got a few questions here. First one, is there any reason to wash yeast instead of using the entire yeast cake over again?
I guess if you're looking for a little more work, it is definitely a little more work to wash your yeast. But as far as an effect on your beer, the stuff that we've done here at Brülosophy has shown that tasters can't tell a difference. In my own beers, occasionally I have been known to use an entire yeast cake over again. I generally tend to filter out some of the hot particulate. But I can't, unless it kind of comes down, unless you're concerned about your yeast having just gone through maybe like a big beer and being kind of tired and worn out. But in that case, I probably wouldn't wash them anyways. I'd probably just start over fresh. But, in terms of washing versus using the entire cake, I guess it just comes down to if you're concerned about having extra trub or dead yeast cells in your batch.
Yeah, I feel like there's kind of two parts to this question as well. So you've got the issue of cleanliness of your yeast that you're using, as well as pitch count, right? So when you rack wort onto an entire yeast cake, you are in essence over pitching. I mean, there's a lot of yeast cells in there, and so if you're concerned about over pitching, then one thing you might do is pour off, a 1 quart jar or so of that yeast and just pitch that into your next batch. I've done that plenty of times. We've got a couple experiments on that as well. And it seems to work quite well. I question again, this whole thing that you need to rinse the yeast first. Now, I think there's some value in having a clean yeast. I think you can probably take that out. Again, this is just conjecture on my part, but my guess would be that you can take that out further if you're going to continue to reuse it, if it's nice and clean. But I'm telling you, and I think, Denny Kahn, I was talking to him about this, and he was saying, yeah, he just takes about 1 quart or so of yeast slurry from a previous batch, and you pitch that into fresh wort. And boom, man, you're getting active fermentation within a few hours, and it seems to work fine. So his next question, he says, is there any noticeable difference between dry and liquid yeast? I use dry yeast since it's much easier, though my beer snob friends say they can tell the difference. Oh, this is I think a very touchy question here.
Well, I've used dry yeast, I've used liquid yeast, and both my beers have come out great. Or all my beers have come out great with both types. I mean, I shouldn't say all my beers. I should say most of my beers have come out great. But the difference is I haven't been able to tell whether dry yeast or whether it's liquid yeast in similar types of beers. They both come out about the same in my experience.
I agree, sort of. I'm not entirely convinced. Like when you hear about, I think the most popular strain out there, Chico. Well, we'll see how much longer that remains the most popular. But the Chico strain, right? So this is Imperial's their flagship. It's White Labs 001 California Ale and Wyeast 1056, and of course Fermentus is their USO 5. People claim that that's the same yeast, but in my experience, they're a little bit different. And we've done a couple of comparisons that seem to support that. So what I suggest is don't view them as being the same. View them as being kind of their own independent product that is going to impart their own, character to beer, and then determine what you like better. To me, that seems the kind of the easiest and the best route to go when it comes to determining what yeast you want to use, or any ingredient for that matter. So another one, I'm a big fan of the Imperial has they have the Global, which is the Weihenstephaner strain. In my experience, there's a dry variant, the W3470, that works quite well. And I think a lot of people are getting good results from that yeast as well. So again, determine for yourself, try out these different strains and see what you think. Don't listen to your beer snob friends. They're just doing that to make themselves feel better. All right, third and final question from James. He asks, why do we need to oxygenate wort before pitching yeast, yet oxidation is bad for beer? Great question.
Well, I think the difference, and the only time you really want to introduce oxygen into your beer is right after you've chilled your wort, because those yeast, if you don't have enough of them, at least, yeast need oxygen to multiply and thrive. And lack of oxygen tends to be the limiting factor as far as yeast growth. So if you need more yeast, you need to have more oxygen.
Good enough for me. Next question.
Eric Nelson via email asks, and this is a great one for you, Marshall. He says, I am on a never-ending quest to produce crisp and clean lagers. I've recently done 2 lagers, a Helles and a Mexican lager, as well as a simple cream ale. All of them came out well without off flavors. However, they tasted pretty much the same. Not much bitterness or hoppiness, and they finished with a bready finish. The crazy thing is I use different yeast malt hops with water profiles on all of them, but they taste eerily similar. I took my German lager to a local homebrew shop, and they thought it was a solid, clean beer, but tastes like a cream ale. I haven't gotten any off flavors with any batch. I have no idea what's happening. The only thing I can come up with is maybe my water profile is limiting my hop utilization. It would be great to hear your thoughts.
Well, my mind immediately goes to he needs to limit oxygen throughout. I'm just joking, throughout his entire process. But you know, maybe that would have an impact. I'm not dissing it.
Yeah.
But really, what my mind goes to is this concept, and I think we really need to research this more because I'm fascinated by the concept of a house character. That there's just, you know, whatever it is, where you brew, the way you brew, the water that you're using, all of that stuff contributes to what is ultimately a house character that kind of is the thing that ties all of your beers together, regardless of whether it's a big Russian Imperial Stout or, you know, a nice German Pilsner. So that's kind of one thought. You might want to try using store-bought water or filtering your water or doing something different there. But the other thing that comes to my mind is, and it has to do with the comment that your German lager tastes like a cream ale. So a cream ale is supposed to taste like a Pilsner. That's the whole idea. And so, you know, it's so incredibly difficult. I encourage anybody out there to try this out. Have somebody, a friend of yours, something like that, go buy 4 or 5 different beers, not tell you what they are, serve them to you, and you try to determine what style they are. It could be an IPA sitting in front of you. I promise you it's going to be more difficult than you think. So for somebody to say it tastes like a cream ale, I mean, that's just throwing darts, you know, in my opinion. And I'm not dissing, you know, the person who told you this, Eric, but I'm just pointing out that it's very, very difficult. And the fact that he says it tastes like a cream ale, it's probably pretty good actually, because that is basically an American lager is like a cream ale, and you're getting close with your German lager there. I wouldn't worry too much about that. You haven't gotten any off flavors? It sounds to me like you're doing pretty great. I'd keep on doing what you're doing and maybe try to hone in on whatever that house character might be, just by, you know, slowly kind of reiteratively moving through your ingredients in your process.
Yeah, I mean, we are our biggest critics. I think I've brought Marshall several beers before saying like, yeah, this one's okay. Or like when we went up in Yakima, I was like, this beer's all right. And you're like, no, dude, this is phenomenal. So I would encourage you, Eric, to not be super critical of yourself. And, you know, you've only asked one other guy to homebrew shop. You know, I mean, they run a shop, but they don't, no offense, don't necessarily know everything. So, you know, take it to a panel of people, give it to 4 or 5 people. Don't say anything about it. Just give it to them and tell them ask them what they think. And, you know, maybe take some of their feedback and then go from there and get back to us. Let us know what they say. And if it is something like that, we can toss some other ideas out to you.
Absolutely. Well, and one of the things, I mean, this is where I think a lot of people get encouraged to enter a competition. And I think one of the things, one of the more positive components of entering a competition is that you are priming those judges. They know the style of beer that you intended to brew. And so maybe by entering a competition of some sort and you saying that this is a German Pilsner, you know, they're going to taste it and judge it as though it is a German Pilsner. You might get a little bit more objective feedback that way. But ultimately, again, it sounds like you're doing things right. It seems to me like this might just be more of a house character thing, and those can be difficult to figure out where it's coming from, but it can also be kind of fun to search for it. So, all right, Seth Stahl from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania asks, he says, I've heard the term double dry hopped used on just about every recent IPA. Does this refer to the beer being dry hopped at 2 separate times, or rather that the beer is dry hopped with twice the normal amount of hops? If the later is true, please explain how that amount is determined.
Well, I think it's actually the former. I believe in the industry, at least, that double dry hop refers to where you add 2 or you add hops twice. So with the New England IPA, this can be adding during a biotransformation, as a biotransformation addition, or if it's more of a West Coast, it can just be double dry hopping. At maybe so that one sits for 3 days and one sits for a week. I think the idea behind it, at least, is that you're trying to create kind of a layered effect with how long the hops have been sitting in the beer. I think the other effect is double dry hop sounds pretty cool. So if you're looking for something on the shelf and it sees double dry hopped, I mean, who doesn't want double dry hopped in a beer? As far as our experiences and whether that's actually makes a difference, I think there's been an experiment where there was a single versus double dry hopped. Is that correct?
We did an experiment comparing a beer that received a single dose of dry hops to one that received a double dose. My understanding is the same as yours. This is about packing as much hop character into a beer as possible, and whether it makes a big difference on the commercial scale. It does. I think there's a marketing component to it. Though nowadays with the whole biotransformation thing, like you said, it sort of makes sense that you would get the characteristics from a biotransformation dry hop, and then maybe later on down the fermentation line, adding another dose of hops just to pack that character in there. People are definitely adding double the amount of hops, but that is just, as far as I know, just a big dry hop charge. So,
yeah. All right. Garrett Brooks via email says, I recently started using a brew bag instead of my typical 3-tier sparge setup in order to cut down on time and cleanup. I've had great results, but what sucks is finding a consistent insulating method for my mash tun. Right now I'm using some blankets, some bungee cords, which works, but I thought I might fashion some type of false bottom to keep my brew bag off the bottom of the kettle and just hit it with some heat. Do you have any other methods you've used or things you've heard of?
Oh, this is such a good question. And I think it's one of those things all Brew in a Bag brewers at least consider at some point. And for me, there's this kind of conventional idea, this almost like this mandate that you have to mash for 60 minutes, right? What we've been finding in our experiments, as well as our experiences with the whole short and shoddy brewing thing, is that it doesn't seem a shorter mash rest doesn't seem to have a negative impact on the quality of the wort that we're creating. Now, the reason I say that is because if you don't want to lose as much heat, it doesn't seem like you have to let things sit for 60 minutes. Maybe you can reduce that mash rest, and that's one way to kind of limit temperature losses during the mash rest. 20 minutes, we're getting about, I think we're getting about 80 to 85% of the extraction that we would at a 60-minute mash rest. So you do have to increase the amount of grains that you use to some degree, but maybe that's worth it. The other thing is just not to really worry about that temperature loss. You might be driving a little bit more dryness in the beer, but I've lost upwards of 8 to 10 degrees doing Brew in a Bag, and the beers come out totally fine in my experience. That said, I'm using insulated mash tuns still. Brian, I know you're not. This is something that you've dealt with.
Yeah, I just recently started switching over to being a little more insulating, and I've used Reflectix. So I put 2 layers of Reflectix around my kettles and try to have them as tight as possible. And I'm losing maybe 2 or 3 degrees over the course of an hour. That's sitting in a garage that's, a toasty 55 degrees. So I found that works really well. It looks nice. It has that metallic finish, so it still looks kind of snazzy, and it's relatively an inexpensive fix that you can easily remove when you go to put it on an open flame, or just leave it on if you're electric.
Yeah. I've used Reflectix in the past as well, and it's surprisingly insulative. It actually works quite well, and it's cheap. You can get a whole roll of the stuff at Home Depot or wherever, some hardware store. I think it's like $20 for a roll, and you're going to have some left over. So, I can't think of any other way. I wouldn't do. I get a little bit scared of mixing flames with the brew bag stuff. That fabric does melt, and I've made the mistake a few times of not paying close enough attention when the flame is on, and you don't want to have to buy another bag just because you made a mistake like that. So
right. Plus, if you're not really recirculating or not stirring, you're also just kind of heating the bottom of the kettle, and you're not necessarily going to get the heat going throughout the whole kettle unless you're recirculating. At least that's been my experience. So I would encourage you to try out either utilizing a shorter mash if you are concerned about temperature, or if you want to do a longer mash, that's fine. And then just keep insulating with whatever technique works for you.
Cool. Hopefully that helps Garrett out a little bit. We got another question here from Matt McGee from Colorado Springs, Colorado. This came in via email. He says, "What would it take?"
This is a great question.
So good. What would it take for an award-winning homebrewer brewing any style to make the same or better quality of beer as a professional brewer making the same style? I.e., what goes into recipe design, process, number of batches, etc. So I'm going to read this because I think it's kind of necessary to set the question up. He says, here's background of my question with probably more questions in it. I'm a noob, so my perspective is of a standpoint that is much earlier in the knowledge than many of your listeners. I don't actually know if that's true or not, but he says, I've attempted homebrewing twice. Once at a class at a homebrew store and once with a friend on his system. Both times the beer ended up being less than meh. Thin, not very well flavored, and not very inspiring. These experiences left me thinking that homebrewing was not for me, and that this has been validated with myriad new breweries popping up all over Colorado Springs. Many started by homebrewers who are producing beer that's okay, but not memorable. There's that word again. But some are making exceptional beers, like WeldWorks, where the brewer Neil is a former home brewer who's been doing this for only several years. That piqued my interest again. I'm formulating this question while listening to the Brewlosophy podcast as I'm road tripping to Glenwood Springs for the release of Leaner from Casey Brewing and Blending. All right, so Matt goes on to say that his interest in home brewing was reignited by the realization that he's been spending a lot of money traveling to these breweries to purchase beer that he enjoys, hence the root of his question. Can I make the same quality of beer as these professional brewers at home? I'm gonna let you hammer this one out first, Brian.
All right. So my initial response to this was yes. You can make the same quality of beer as these professional brewers at home. It may not be the exact same beer, but as far as quality goes, that's a yes. So going back through his question here, he says that he's attempted it twice. And I don't know about you, but there's been some things that I'm not necessarily a natural at, and things that I've attempted twice that have kind of come out less than meh. But the lesson for that has been try it again. My first two beers were brewed in cold climate Fairbanks with no running water, and I was jury rigging this and that. One tasted like ham and the other one tasted like apple schnapsy Coors Light, and I did stop for a while after that because I was like, man, this is not so good. But it's just like any hobby, you've gotta put a little. I don't want this to sound condescending, but it's like you got to put a little time into it. You got to read a couple things. You got to maybe try it out with a buddy, that sort of thing. It is a skill that does take time to get. And these breweries that you're going to and these beers that you're hunting down, this is not their first rodeo. They've done this before. So I don't mean for that to sound anything other than inspiring. That's like, yes, you can get there. And a lot of the techniques that we talk about, a lot of the processes we talk about, those are one avenue of getting there, but there is a wealth of information. These brewers that you're going to, talk to them. Some of them may brush you off, and that's their loss. But some of them will bring you in, and they'll talk to you about that, and they will provide some knowledge and some more inspiration to keep you going and push you to create that beer that you're seeking.
Absolutely. This is such a good and rich question that hits on a lot of aspects that I don't think we regularly get to address publicly, given what it is we do. So I'm going to go through and point a couple of things out. One of them, first off, is what is it why are you homebrewing, right? I think that's a question homebrewers ought to ask themselves. Am I doing it because I want to save money, not traveling around to these breweries and spending money on their beer, and I just want to make beer that's as good as theirs? Or am I doing it for something else? And for me, I homebrew because I love so much more about it than just the beer. I love the community first and foremost. I mean, I love talking with all of you people and meeting new people and hanging out and trying beer. And maybe it's not going to be as good as WeldWorks or Russian River or whatever all the time, but it's exciting and it's new and it's novel, and somebody crafted that with their hands, in their kitchen or in their garage. And as sentimental as that might sound, that's what keeps me in this hobby. I love experimenting. I love, so I think if a person, I think the people that you see falling off the homebrew bandwagon are those who thought that they might be able to save a couple bucks brewing fantastic beer, in their home. It just really doesn't work that way, at least at the start. But like you said, Brian, I think there's, you start to hone your skill, and it's like, they talk about like muscle memory and how, sports stars over time without intention just develop the ability to do these amazing feats without even really thinking about it. They develop that muscle memory. And I think there's an aspect to most crafts, whether it's brewing or knitting, whatever, that is kind of like that. You just know what to do. You can do it with your eyes closed, and all of those tiny little pieces might add up to, that's why this guy is such a great brewer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, there's certain beers that I can go downstairs and just crank out, and they'll come out to my liking, no problem. There's other beers that I am not proficient in, where it would take me a little while to get there. I mean, like we've talked about numerous times, it took me 15 or 20 batches of New England IPA brewing to figure out what it is that I really, really like. And on top of that, I'd already been brewing for 12 years. So I mean, Matt, I would encourage you to try it again. I would encourage you to try it with friends, because that's the best way to brew. But you can learn a lot from doing something multiple times on your own or with somebody else. And I think absolutely. That's what will help you.
And the other aspect of this question, and this is one that I'm liable to get some shit for talking about, but is this idea that homebrewers are very quickly, they brew 3 or 4 batches, they get a dream to own a brewery, for whatever reason that they want to do it. And then they somehow get the funding for it, and they start these breweries, and they're making crappy beer, and we'll call it what it is. We've all been to these places, and we all probably live next to a couple of these places. That to me is an issue, and it's not for homebrewers necessarily. Yeah, sure, we might have lost one homebrewer, who went pro, and that's all good. But for beer in general, or craft beer in general, when you don't really know what you're doing, and you don't have a product that is as good as to others that you might think it is, you're kind of tarnishing the reputation of the craft. I don't know. That's kind of how I look at it. I don't care. I want people to follow their dreams, but I feel like there's been a lot, at least over the last maybe 5 to 10 years, a lot of like skipping steps that I think those who came before us, or even though those people who are, going into professional brewing now and making great beer, that they didn't skip, right? So whether that's a formal education, I'm not sure, or actually having a whole, cache of recipes that are great. Maybe getting some medals under your belt, working pro-am with other brewers, stuff like that, I think really does play into one's ability to craft a good product.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do tend to rush out into it. And there's not really I wouldn't say there's a fault, but I think that there are a lot of people that get a lot of positive feedback. It's hard to have somebody's, not anymore as I've been brewing, but it's hard to have somebody's beer and look them in the eye and say, this isn't so good, because that the time and the effort that they've put into that. And I do think that a lot of people that open these breweries prematurely get a lot of positive feedback from friends and family that say, hey, you're making a great thing. And they, it's great to hear. And, I don't know where it started that the dream of every home brewer is to go pro. I can see it being appealing. You're kind of in the club, and you get to share your beer with more people easier. I would be lying if I said it hasn't seemed appealing to me, but I just haven't really gotten to where I feel like that is the final step for me, or that is the goal here. Yeah. So I think a lot of people kind of, they get a lot of support, and they think they can do it, and they move on. And I think that enthusiasm is great. And I'm all, like you said, I'm all for people following their dreams. But, just like any business that you're going to start, or anything that you're going to go out and do professionally, there is a certain level of education, and especially in the brewing world, a certain level of consistency of being able to brew well that you want to have before you do that.
Absolutely. You want to be prepared. I mean, it's as simple as that. You hit on Matt. I know that this wasn't the core of your question, but it's good for us to be able to sit and talk about this. And I think a lot of people do wonder this. I get emails daily from people asking about going pro and like what kind of things to do. I don't brew professionally, so these are just my thoughts here. But this idea, of like, I'm going to rely on my friends and my family for this feedback. If you're going to do that, you cannot get butthurt when they don't like it. Otherwise, all you're doing is asking them to lie to you, right? And so you're going to go out there and you're going to produce this beer and try to sell it that people who don't give a shit what you think are going to tell you sucks, right? You have to be able to take that feedback and not get hurt by it if it's bad. I like feeling comfortable knowing that I can be honest about that without hurting home brewers or professional brewers' feelings. And that's just my take. So.
Right. I think people in the community that do brew and do give feedback to each other, they know that when someone tells you that, all right, this beer tastes astringent, they're not saying, hey, you're an asshole. They say,
yeah, exactly.
Hey, this beer, there's something wrong with this beer. I mean, I give feedback to people all the time, brewers, home brewers, and I'm blunt with them. I say, these are the, I don't even do this. It's not like you're trying to sandwich anything into good, bad, good. It's just these are the good things about the beer. These are the things I don't like about the beer. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm just one person. So, I think if you, we're totally sidetracking, but it's like, if you are somebody that's thinking about moving on to that step, know that we're saying this as, trying to be encouraging to go out and make sure you've dotted all your T's and checked all your I's and everything that you are going in this to be successful. Because I would love to see a brewery on every corner. I would love to have more breweries in this country. I think that's a great thing, but we want to make sure that that the people that are going into this are being as, I don't know how to describe it, I guess as supported or as informed as they possibly can.
Yeah, so. we want those breweries to be making beer that we want to drink.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the key. So, well, Matt, thanks for allowing us to kind of go off on our high horse with that question. We've got one more question, but before we get to that, I want to tell you guys about Brewers Hardware, a really great company who specializes in tri-clover compatible sanitary fittings, conical fermenters, kettles, and brew stands. They're a sponsor of ours, and we're really proud to be affiliated with them. Brewers Hardware offers a variety of unique and hard to find items for both the home and craft brewing markets, including high quality stainless fittings at competitive prices and very fast shipping. For those who live near Huntington Beach, California, they also offer in-house welding for customized kettles, which is pretty rad. You can head over to brewershardware.com or give them a call at 714-891-1150 to find anything you need for your brewery. And if you mention Brulosophy at checkout, they'll even toss in a fun free gift. That's brewershardware.com. Okay, for our final question. This is one that didn't come from just a single person, and it's really not even that important, but I figured I would address it because people do seem interested. I get it all the time, and it's this. How in the world did you come up with the term short and shoddy? How did you come up with that series name for this project that we do where we brew these beers using crazy unconventional methods? It's kind of a fun story. So I work in a prison as a psychologist. That's what I do as my real job. And in prison, there is, and this, I've worked with men and I've worked with women and I've noticed it at both. There is a saying when somebody is close to the gate, which means that they're coming up on their parole, and people get, as you might imagine, you get impatient. You just want to get out of prison and get back to your life and doing whatever it is they do. And they call that short to the gate. That means you have less time, your reduced time to parole. And when people get like that, they get a little bit antsy. And so there's the term in both males and female prisons, short and shitty, which just means that you're short to the gate and you're acting like a little punk about it. And so I just wanted to, I thought something that is applicable to what we're doing, short and brewing with these shoddy methods. We're typically reducing those brew days and using wonky methods. And so that's where that came from, to answer that. Now I don't have to type it out a million times.
You might have to.
Yeah. And people still ask. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because, what a lot of people thought was, oh, it's a play on your last name, short and shoddy. It really wasn't. Yeah.
That's
it really
clever.
was not. Well, I didn't come up with it. So all the people who presume that are the clever ones. But it really has everything to do with I was inspired at least by my work with inmates who do bad things in our community. So, anyways, that's it. That's our show for today. If you have any questions you would like answered on a future Brü A episode, please shoot them to marshall@brulosophy.com, or you can send them to feedback@brulosophy.com. Just make sure in the subject heading that you put that it's for Brü A episode. We typically don't respond to those emails because we are going to address them in a Brü A show. If you want more of these episodes, please let us know. We're willing to sit around and answer these questions as much as you want us to. Like I said at the front of the show, we're planning on doing this every 10th show or so, but we can do it every 8th or every 5th or whatever it is you guys want. Let us know. And if you want to read about all the other wacky stuff that we're up to, you can head over to brulosophy.com and check it out there. The Brulosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brulosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brulosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brulosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it suits my bro. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no